Too often in leadership, in life, in education, you just accept the way things are, right? The way things have always been done. And it's sort of these premises, this model, maybe this schema of education in this example of how school is supposed to run. And a lot of it is good, but not all of it, right? And what I wanted to challenge you to do is to think deeply about all these sort of mechanics of operating a school and consider, is this good for me? Is this good for campus? Is this the type of do school different outcome that I want to produce? Right. And if it's not, then change the narrative, change the game, make choices because you are a ruckus maker. And so I'm thrilled because this episode and a string of episodes that I'll be creating with my very good friend, Jethro Jones from the Transformative Principle, we are going to start riffing on different ideas in education that we think you should reject. So this content series is called Reject the Premise. And basically, each episode, we will riff on 3 ideas that we think a lot of people accept that actually should be rejected. Now, a couple points. You don't have to accept what we say. So reject what Jethro and I say and make up your own narrative if you're not aligned. If you are aligned, then think and figure out what it means for you. And so today's episode, we're talking about how learning is not linear, why it's a bad idea to not change anything the first year. And we also reject the premise that as a principal, you have to be the first in and the last out. And this is some very common advice that school leaders are given. Hey, I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so they create a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to listeners just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million podcasts worldwide. So like I said, Jethro from the Transformative Principle is joining me on this content series of Ruckus Makers Reject the Premise. Today is the first episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be right back after a quick message from our show sponsors. Want to know how top schools create collaborative learning environments that actually work? ODP Business Solutions has equipped innovative educators for over 3 decades. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's make a ruckus together. Over 1 million teachers rely on IXL because it's empowering. It helps them make better decisions with reliable data, and it adapts instruction based on student performance. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Express Ability. They are building AI tools that actually make school leadership easier. From secure AI-powered chatbots to time-saving automation, they're helping districts work smarter, not just harder. Want to be your district's hero? Visit k12ability.com. That's k12ability.com. All right, Danny and Jethro here, Team Ruckus Maker, officially, unofficially. And this is exciting. This is exciting for me. Jethro and I, we used to do these videos. Man, remember that? That's when I first moved to Belgium. And
Yeah.
we would sort of just go live on, I think, on Facebook and just talk about education, that kind of thing. It's been fun. And since those times, you and I have stayed connected pretty close. We have a recurring Friday call, right? Where we're just checking in, what's working in business, what are you up to, these type of things. And then it's been at least a year, but I was like, what if we co-wrote a book? So the idea was that Ruckus Makers Reject the Premise, right? That's the book title. And I got that from my category design mentors, right?
Mhm.
Because, that's something they teach, reject the premise. But it's certainly within our philosophy. And I think that's because too often school leaders, educators, they accept the way of doing school without thinking for themselves. Is this what's best for me? What's best for kids? What the type of educator I want to be, ruckus maker, whatever. And the whole point of view of do school different. So Jethro was like, cool, let's do it. I'm just giving a little context and then
Sure.
I'll stop. And then after that, we came up with this idea. We listed all these things that we reject. So we're going to start recording. And yeah, we've got note cards on it.
Look at all this.
And yeah. And then, well, I need your help here. We decided to do 4 note cards per idea.
Mm-hmm.
One was like the premise we would reject.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing we would do is we'd take a note card and we'd write a premise that we're rejecting. And then we'd cross it out. And below that, we'd write the new belief that we want people to have, the new premise, if you will. The second one is we would have a quote or a story to go along with it. And so that would be like something to kind of focus and get everything together. And then we'd have the riff, as we like to call it, where we just riff off of whatever that topic is. And we just jot notes down and say, this is what we're thinking. And then finally, we have a visual to go along with it. Now, if you're listening, you're not going to see it, but the visual helps you visualize and see what it is that we're talking about. Now, I'm not an artist, so that part was daunting to me, but I tried to
I like your noodles.
Well, thank you. I actually, welcome. I enjoyed doing it after a while because I realized I'm not artistic, but I had to force myself to simplify my thoughts and my drawing down to one easy to understand image. And sometimes I nailed it, and other times it just totally stunk. And other times I just had no idea and I gave up on it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I love doodling and drawing. I've always been like that, so that wasn't as much of a struggle. But yeah, so we had the 4 cards per idea, and then we went off and worked. I was in Morocco, and so on the flight over to Morocco, my wife had a work event. I knocked out a bunch, and then I found this just sweet coffee shop in Marrakesh, and for 2 days, just boom, and I was done. Yeah. Where did you write the book?
Well,
the note cards, at least.
I wrote the note cards on a flight to Tokyo, Japan, and then partly when I was in Japan. Right. And so I find it funny that we both had to leave the country to get it done. And what I found with the other books that I've written is that taking time away from my typical environment has always helped me to do the writing and to say, while I'm gone, this is what I'm going to focus on. And that has been very helpful. So writing retreat that's how I've written all my books.
100%. So there's been some leadership lessons we've already dropped. One, time away from work when you're doing sort of new net value work and like vision type stuff, creative stuff. It helps to get out of the normal routine, out of your office, out of campus. It helps to collaborate, with partners. And we wrote this in an analog way first, right? No technology. And so that helps too because of so many distractions, right, in the world. I guess we also had a sort of like constraints, right? We made a list. We said we would do 4 things and 4 things only for every idea. And so that helped keep things tight. So what got us to today's video is then we opened a Google Doc, we started writing, and it just felt like too much. At least that was how I felt. And we abandoned the project for maybe a year. Did I get anything wrong there, or is that how you experienced it too?
Well, it wasn't quite a year. It was more like 6 months. So, so I went to Japan in August of 24, and it's now May of 25. So maybe 8 months. But still, the other thing is that's another leadership lesson, is that when it felt too heavy, then we were okay with letting it go. And so we didn't feel like we had to like follow through on the commitment. We felt like we needed to reassess and realign where we were. And we still wanted to, the way I see it, Danny, and you can correct me if you have a different perception, but the way I see it is we wanted to create something together.
Yep.
And a book was a natural thing. And then that felt heavy. So we decided to do something different. So we're going to do this podcast series now and see how that feels. And we're going to try that out and see what it feels like.
Right. Yeah. There's one step before that. So then you tweeted, but it was a tweet from a year ago. It was a tweet from when we first started the project, and it was a picture of your note cards, right? And you're like, I'm starting a book called Reject the Premise. And I was like, I saw it in my feed. I'm like, Jethro, I thought we had a tight relationship. We agreed to abandon the project.
Yeah. You're all offended. You're stealing my idea.
I don't know that I was offended. I was like, this doesn't seem like Jethro. And so instead of jumping to conclusions, I wanted to call you, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I saw him like, that doesn't seem like within his character, but I want to check in because he said,
Yeah.
I'm writing a book and it's the title, right?
Yeah.
And when I called you, I'm like, dude, the tweet. He's like, and you were like, yeah, that's from a year ago, and somebody just commented on it.
Yeah.
And the way social media works and algorithms, yeah, if you comment on something, it could be 5 years ago. Your network within your social media is gonna see that comment and it's gonna, resurrect, so to speak, the post. And that was good. That was clarity. That's when we were like, well, what if we did a show where we go through the premises that we reject? And this is maybe the last leadership lesson. We'll get transcripts from this. That'll be sort of a first draft other than writing it. So we're going to talk out the book and we can organize, edit it from there and put it into proper book form. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And the reason why we took the time to share all of this is because I think it's valuable to see what the process is like for doing something like this. And
sure.
everybody's busy, everybody's got stuff going on. And that doesn't mean that there's a perfect or right way to do it. And one of the things that I've been focusing on is doing things in flow and not
Mhm.
forcing things. And there are places in my life where I make real sacrifices that that I do the things that I don't want to do. And there are other
Mhm.
places where that just doesn't work at all. And so I need to be in flow in order for it to be my best work. And so that's what we're trying to do here is find a way to make this flow and help us both be in our best creative element to create the best work possible.
100%. So let's jump into the content. Just the last thing for the Ruckus Maker listening, we're gonna alternate shows, right? So this show is releasing Better Leaders, Better Schools. I don't know what episode it is, but this is the first part. We'll try to get through 3 ideas if we can, and then the next show will be over on the Transformative Principal podcast, and we'll keep ping ponging back and forth. So if you want all the content, it'll be like that. And if you're not subscribed to both shows, like now's a great time to do that. Or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe as well. So cool. All right. Learning is not linear. What do
Mm.
you got for me?
Well, learning is all learning is personal, no matter
Yeah.
what it is. It's personal, and you can have the best explicit instruction set up and everything. And the reality is no matter how hard you work at that, no matter how much science of learning there is, each individual person has to choose for themselves that they're going to apply it and actually learn it. And most of the time we think about like learning as in being able to get a good grade on a test or complete an assignment. And
Hmm.
there's really so much more to it. And learning happens all the time. No matter where you're at, you can always be learning. Some people choose to put emphasis on that, some people don't. But my big issue is when we say the only learning that matters is what happens in the four walls of our classroom. And that
Hmm.
is just a travesty in my mind.
Yeah, I just added on to that point. I don't remember what I was reading, but the concept was, school, let's say is like 20% of a kid's life. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but you know what I mean? The hours of school versus the hours at home. And what if you started to prioritize, center, honor, whatever word you want to use, but the learning that's happening outside of the school? What if you built a bridge from what families, right, and churches and community organizations, like what kids are learning out there and bringing that into the school? Would it be a little more relevant, and that kind of thing? So, yeah, appreciate what you shared there. You got a cool quote by Darwin, too. You want to read that one?
Yeah, it is the long history of humankind and animal kind too. Those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. And this is where that idea of collaborating with folks outside of the school is so important. Parents are students' first educators,
Yeah.
and their most important primary educators as well. You can't out teach what is happening in the home. And we do this arrogant thing where we say we want parents to partner with us. Well, that is exactly the opposite of how it should be. We should be partnering with parents. And I have a quick story to share. I was talking with some school administrators, and one of them said, parents don't have any accountability if their kids don't learn. And I was like, are you crazy? They have more accountability than you could ever imagine.
Mm,
If your school is doing poorly and the accountability that you're talking about is that it might get taken over by the state and maybe 50% of the people will be replaced, that's about the most severe accountability that can be. That is nowhere near the accountability of a parent who has a 30-year-old kid living in their house because they haven't figured out how to be an adult yet and they're
mm.
still dependent on them at 30 years old. That's a different kind of accountability that we as educators can't even fathom. We can go find another job. We can move on in our lives, but that parent has to live with that child and their success or failure for the rest of that child's life because they'll never stop being their parent, even if you may stop being their teacher or their principal.
And that's a very solid point. So, yeah, imagine that. I mean, that's a ton of accountability that the family's feeling, and I you're talking about arrogance. I think so often, and what if the schools said, "Let us partner with the parent," right, instead of partner with us? Because when they say
Mhm.
partner with us, it's in parentheses in invisible ink. It says because we know better, and that's a problem, right? And parents feel that at times if that's the type of energy or presence that your school has. The only thing I think, I want to add to this, learning's not linear. Like the metaphor I was thinking of was it's a lot like dancing. You know what I mean? You move forward, sometimes you move backwards, sometimes side to side, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, right? It's an experience. So to enjoy the process of learning and maybe being less focused on the grades and the outputs, but the whole process is like what to focus on. I think that's important too, because I talk a lot to leaders about what you can control and what you can't. You can control the process and how the process goes, but what happens at the end of the process, it's kind of all luck. It's all sort of luck and chance, and you make a bet. There's an idea that if we do these things, we'll get the result we want. Maybe, you can do a
Mhm.
lot of good things and still get a bad result. We all know people that do a lot of stupid stuff and somehow they're winning at times at life, right? And that's what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, I'll just explain the image that goes along with this. And it is school seems to think that learning looks like this
Show us
s-
too, because some people
straight
are
line.
watching
Oh
on
yeah.
video.
Oh yeah, for those who are watching on video, people think school looks like or learning looks like a straight line and the reality is it's all ski wampus and it goes all over the place in different ways and it is not a straight path. It teaching can be a straight line, but learning will always be tons of different things coming together and something hitting one kid that doesn't hit another kid. And one kid gets it because of their life experience, what they've done. And another kid, it'll just go right over their head and they won't have any understanding of it. And that's totally natural. That's not a bad thing. That's not something we need to be afraid of. What we need
Mhm.
to do is value and recognize all learning, not just what we teach.
Right on. And there's no such thing as failure, only learning, right? If you actually reflect, think about what's happened. There's after action reviews, there's tons of reflection tools and journal prompts. But if you actually explore, what happened there and what do you want to do next time? What do you want to keep doing? That kind of thing. Then we're always learning, even in our moments of, failure, I guess. It's still learning. So
Mm-hmm.
I think here we'll take a quick break for some messages from our sponsors. But when we get back, we got two more ideas that we reject. One would be don't change anything the first year. So have you ever
Oh,
heard that?
oh,
And this one I really despise. Principals should be the first one in and the last one out. So
oh, yeah.
we're getting spicy over here.
There we
All
go.
right. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools in 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Here's the thing about creating remarkable learning spaces: you need a partner who gets it, someone who understands that transforming education isn't just about swapping whiteboards for smartboards, it's about reimagining what's possible. That's why innovative school leaders trust ODP Business Solutions. We don't just deliver supplies, we help you design dynamic learning spaces that make students actually excited to show up. From tech integration that brings lessons to life to flexible furniture that transforms any space into a collaboration zone, to sustainable solutions that teach by example. We've got everything you need to do school different. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. This helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However, you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts just like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. We've seen it too many times. Great school leaders burned out by busy work. It's 2025. AI should be helping, not adding more confusion. But most districts hesitate, and for good reason: data privacy concerns and practical implementation concerns. That's why we partnered with our friends over at Express Ability, who is solving both of those problems. They scrub all personally identifiable info before anything hits a large language model. And they build fast. Think AI powered apps that help your staff get answers, automate tasks, and win back time. Whether it's a chatbot answering your district's policies or automation that lifts the load on your team, this is AI that works in the real world. Want to talk about how it could work for you? Let's connect and turn your district's biggest headaches into your next success story. Visit k12ability.com today. That's k12ability.com. Something that drove me nuts as a ruckus maker was hearing teachers say, "I taught it, they should have learned it." But really, some teachers just don't know how to reteach so that all kids get it. That's where IXL comes in. IXL's diagnostic automatically identifies knowledge gaps for teachers and provides them with a personalized growth plan for each individual student. Teachers can step into the classroom every day knowing exactly what their students know and what they don't know. IXL's adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual. Close knowledge gaps and accelerate learning at IXL. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. And we're back with Jethro and Danny, and we're ruckus makers. We want to do school different. We reject the premise. We're talking a book out loud, creating podcast content around it, and then we're going to edit, organize, and package it up in case you want to purchase this as well. But right now, we're just giving value, right? And so don't change anything your first year. We reject that premise.
Big
Why
time.
do you reject it?
Well, the reality is the premise we accept on this is make changes that align to your vision as soon as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
the key there is having a vision and being clear about what you want. And if you don't do that, then what's going to happen is you're going to fall into this trap of that's the way we've always done it. And
Mm,
the longer you wait to change something, the more power that phrase has because you've been allowing it and you've been
mm-hmm.
letting it happen. And so, what are some examples of things that you think should change in the first year?
For me, like things you should change. That's a really great question. Something I would think about is, I mean, obviously, sort of the vision of the school, like where things are headed, because this is a whole
Mm-hmm.
new, depends on how many people you're bringing in too, right? But you as a principal are certainly going to have sort of a different vision, I would think, for your campus. You're looking at sort of performance over time and you're identifying, those needs and that kind of thing. Potential change might be a sort of culture, right? If it's a good culture, how do we elevate it to the next step? If it's a poor culture, toxic culture, or one that's in the dumps, how do we elevate that as well? If I think of a third, just off the top of my head, things that you can change would be sort of communication. That's obviously super important with all stakeholders. But I know that's something that a lot of faculty, say when a principal starts. We want to understand what's happening on campus. We want to be in the know. We want to be a part of decisions or understand how decisions are made. Da da da. So those might be some things that you change as well. And I guess the last thing I'll say, I have something called the Do School Different scorecard, right? And let's say there's 8 or 10 categories of campus life. And so what I walk leaders through is identify the current reality, picture the ideal future that you want, and then what needs to be done. What are the next steps to start bridging those gaps? So right there might be 8 to 10 different categories, from student life to staff experience to communication, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you can do when you come into a school is you can say, what should we start, stop, and continue in
For
our
sure.
school? And so you
Hmm.
ask that question. And when people say we should stop doing this or we should start doing this, go ahead and do that. Like, you don't have to wait for everybody to say, yes, I agree with this. So for example, one of my schools that I was principal of, we collected lesson plans from all the teachers every week. And they had to turn in their lesson plans by Sunday night at like 5 p.m. And I asked around and I said, hey, who's checking on me on this? What am I supposed to do with this? Nobody could tell me anything. Superintendent, curriculum director, assistant superintendent, teachers union, nobody could say this is why we're doing this. And I said, okay, then you're not required to turn these in anymore, because I'm certainly not going to review all your lesson plans. I'm going to be in your
Hmm.
classrooms,
What a
but I'm not
waste of
going to,
time, right? Like to
yeah,
review your lesson.
terrible. So I just said, all right, we're not doing this anymore. And everybody was like, well, we have to. And I said, well, who says who? I've asked the superintendent and everybody that I can think of. Nobody can say this is why we're doing it. There's no good reason. So we're just going to stop. And people were like, well, you can't do that because we've always turned in our lesson plans.
Wait,
And I'm
your
like,
faculty, or who said wait you
yes,
can't
the
do that?
faculty. And I'm like,
Huh?
do
And they
you,
still wanted to turn that in. That's
yeah.
amazing.
I said, do you want to turn in? Well, and they said, well, this is what helps keep me accountable is
Hmm.
turning in my lesson plans. I was like, well, if you want to turn it in, that's totally fine. You can go ahead and turn it in, but I promise you, I'm never going to look at it. And, and they were like, well, then how am I going to stay on track? And I was like, if you need turning in lesson plans to me to help you stay on track, we got much bigger problems. And, and that's a very real issue. So Peter Drucker, the quote for this one is, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Hmm.
And you can just do things, you can just say, we're not going to keep doing this dumb thing we've been doing, or we're going to start doing this really smart thing that we haven't been doing.
Hmm.
And you can make those changes. And it's not as difficult as you might think.
Yeah. So I think what you're getting to is like, what's the purpose, right? And that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about with reject the premise. Like, don't accept everything. Don't accept what Jethro and I are saying, right? If you don't agree with it, reject what we say too and make up your own mind. But yeah, that idea that we've always done it that way. And really, I mean, to me, I want to teach, or excuse me, treat, faculty as professionals, right? They know how to create lesson plans. Like you said, if I'm in classrooms, it's clear if they're unprepared and that kind of thing. And then we could have a different kind of conversation. Now, if people want feedback on lessons and sort of some strategic support, that also looks a bit different, but that's not a weekly, I'm going to meet with you. That's not efficient, for a principal. If you got instructional coaches, team leads, grade level, department, that kind of thing, maybe they can provide some of that feedback too, sort of a better purpose. But I'm always pulling on the tension of play it safe principles versus ruckus makers. And I like to say that play it safe principles, they protect the status quo, the things we've always done. They also are actually quite proficient at being an administrator, right? But to me, that's sort of like, here's your manual, how to be an administrator. When teachers turn in lesson plans, turn to page 394 to see how like you're supposed to act as an administrator. Ruckus makers, on the other hand, are visitors from the future, right? They're showing us what education could be because they've reimagined education within a traditional system. So they create a campus experience worth showing up for. Last thing I think I want to say on this topic is that, what we're not saying is make tons and very big changes the first year either, right? We're just rejecting that you can't absolutely change anything the first year, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a sweet spot in there. You got to feel that out with central office support, your community, and staff, other peers you respect, in the field. But yeah, we think it's a mistake not to change anything. So, do you have
Yeah.
any last words, or are you good?
Yeah. Last words on this one is, I see 4 different levels of principals in a school.
Mm,
There's the warm body, which is like, I'm just here. I make no decisions. It needs a figurehead. I'm the figurehead. The manager is the one who's just managing everything, administrating the school, making sure nothing burns down, very much keeping the status quo. The leader, which I think most principals aspire to be, is like, I have a vision, this is where we want to go. But taking it to the next level, which is what we're talking about here, is the designer, who is the ruckus maker, who visits from the future and says, this is what our school can be, and we're going to make decisions to make it look like that. And that's where I think all principals should be. You design for the future and you make a plan for it. So I have the visual for this one, which is the pendulum swing, which everybody hates, right? You go from one thing right to the other, and it's like, oh, we used to do this, now we're doing the complete opposite. That's not the kind of change that we're talking about. We're talking about incremental change that goes up and improves over time, like a stock chart. And over time, things are going to be better, but you're going to make some bad decisions in there too. And that's okay. That's not the end of the world. Sometimes you're going to implement something and make a change, and it turns out it wasn't the right thing. And you're going to go back and say, never mind, I made a mistake. And we're going to put that thing back in place because it wasn't good for us to stop or start doing that thing.
Right. So looking for win-wins, I think is important. Looking for leverage, right? So 80-20 rule here, like what's going to get the biggest value, right? For the least amount of effort, I guess. And simplicity is velocity when it comes to change, right? So if you make it complex, you're almost destined to fail. All right. Who here listening or watching has been told be the first one in and the last one out, because you have to be the hardest worker in the building. Oh boy. Jethro, what do you got on that?
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, I'll show you. Can I show you my picture?
Yeah, please.
The old way versus the new way, right?
Yep.
And what I have in the old way, I'll describe the picture too for those just listening. There's a clock, 2 clocks, when you clock in and when you clock out, because your value is measured in punching in, punching out, that you were there for these amount of hours, and therefore you've created value. And the new way that I described in the picture is basically a checklist, and it just says the one thing, right? And that's inspired by the One Thing book, which might have come up with one of the greatest questions of all time, which is, what's the one thing I can do today that makes everything else easier or unnecessary? Any leader of a campus that asks that question and delivers, right, a solution to that question, they're doing some really incredible work. And the thing is, that can take 90 minutes of deep work. You know what I mean? Like, that's not necessarily 8 to 5, right? Is my point. 7 to 5, whatever whatever your hours are. And again, we're not saying that you get to leave work at 10:30, right? What we are saying is that your value and the value you create is not based on the hours you spend on campus, right? And I guess also, if you're modeling first in, last out, you're also sort of modeling, maybe, depending on how your life goes, you might be able to do this and still be healthy, but you might be modeling poor boundaries, right? There's a reason principals don't see their family or kids, right? And that kind of thing. Some of that is sort of the expectations of central office. Some of it they've put on themselves. Nobody actually told them, but they just feel like they have to always be there. And then their family misses out, right? And so be careful of what you're modeling as well. Because in my view, this is actually modeling poor behavior.
Yeah, I agree. It is modeling poor behavior. And the other part of that is that when you are the first one in, the last one out, well, here's the other thing. Let me back up just a sec. One of the things that I say, that I hear principals say all the time, and people have come on my show and said this numerous times, is people first, paper second. And the way that they talk about that is, I do the people work from 9 to 5, and then I do the paperwork from 5 to 9. And
that job sucks.
That job does suck. Who wants to do that job? I sure don't.
Right.
I mean, the principals who go home and then spend hours on their computer continuing to work when they should be just not working, doing the rest of their life, are robbing themselves, their family, their loved ones, of the opportunity to grow and develop with them as a person. And let me tell you, your whatever you're trying to work on and accomplish during that time, it probably doesn't even need to be done. That's the
Mhm.
reality. There's
Mm.
so much. One of my strategies that I used as a principal was, I'm not going to do any paperwork or any assignment from district office until they ask me to do it 3 times. And once they ask me to do it 3 times, I know that they're actually serious. And here's why. I had numerous times where somebody at district office would say, hey, we need this thing and we need it like right away.
Subject line, urgent.
Urgent. We got to get this done today. And so then I would scrap everything
Stop
that I was
everything.
doing.
Yep.
Yep. And I would meet their needs instead of doing the one thing that was actually important. I'd get that done. And then I'd ask them later, hey, what did you end up doing with that? Oh, turns out we didn't need it. The board decided they didn't want it. So we didn't need it. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not falling into that trap. And so those requests are going to come, and you need to evaluate, is that really worth it or not?
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so you talked about being on campus the whole
Mm-hmm.
time, but there's another sinister part of this, which is that you're working the whole time, that you're working all the time,
Mm.
in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and it just continues. And it doesn't have to be that way. And you do have the power to stop it.
Yeah. You know, I like to tell people it's not called district care, it's called self-care.
Yeah.
So you have to take ownership and responsibility for the kind of life that you want to live. And here's the thing. So if you're working all the time, right, and you're not making any change to the experience that you have with work, with family, you know, with whatever's important to you, don't complain,
Yeah.
right? Unless you're making changes and there really is forces working against you, which does happen. And if
Mhm.
that's the case, find a new job, right?
Yep.
Because, you know, breaking news, I have breaking news. This just came in. You want to
Oh,
hear it?
what is it? I hear I'm getting something over the radio. What's the breaking news, Danny?
People aren't coming into education. So,
What?
yeah, teachers and admin. So you have something that's called leverage, right? And so, and listen, I understand it's complex. You have a house that has a mortgage, your kids are going through school. You might not want to move across the country or whatever. That's fine. It might not be East Coast to West Coast, right? Biggie to Tupac. It doesn't have to be that. You might be just the neighboring town, but there's a lot of schools and there's a lot of types of schools, public, private, charter, like, you know, you keep going down the list. And there's places where, you know, because you and I support a lot of school leaders. There are leaders who love their job,
Mhm.
right? And they're not complaining. And yeah, it gets hard. It gets hard. And we also grieve really tough stuff that happens, right? But they also love their job and they have some sort of balance within life. And then if they get out of that, they have a support network and a group or a coach to help them write things, but they've taken responsibility over that, right? And then they see results. So I think that's really important. It's self-care, not district care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have any advice though? Like I could hear the listener saying, hey Jethro, hey Danny. Okay, like conceptually, you're riffing, you have ideas, things that you reject, that's fine. But you know, is there something we can give them practically? Like if you want to reject this premise and create a new narrative for you and your relationship with school leadership, what can they do? Right?
Yeah. So I have 2 things for that. And
Sure.
I want to hear your thoughts also. But the first thing
Yeah.
is, be okay with the work not being finished, because the
Hmm.
reality is the work is not finished anyway.
Anyway.
We are dealing with people's lives, and there is always more that we can do. And so the first thing is, be okay with the work not being done. That would be where I would start. And that's a
Hmm.
mindset issue. That has nothing to do with the district expectations or anything like that. Just
Hmm.
recognize you're not a Superman. You're not going to get everything done that you possibly could. There's always more that you can do. So the other part of that is recognize that you are really doing the best you can every single day, even though the best you can may not be the best possible by anyone anywhere. People being in different life situations with different expectations and realities at home, and things like that, that's all very real. And you may not have the capacity or the ability to do the very best that could be done. So that's number one. Be okay with it not being completed. The second thing is, set a time that you're going to say, I'm finished for today,
Mhm.
and just try it on and say,
Mhm.
that may
Mhm.
be, instead of working till 9:30 tonight, I'm going to work till 8:30. You don't have to like take this all on at once, right? That's the other thing. Don't feel like, okay, I'm going to go from working 12 hours a day to working just 8 hours a day and think that you're going to be okay with that, because you're probably not. So just
Mhm.
start tapering off a little bit here and there, and put boundaries up and say, this is the hard boundary and I'm going to be good with this. Another simple hard boundary you can do is you can take district email off your phone, even if it's a work provided phone.
Mm.
They
Mhm.
can call you. That's why they pay for it. They can call you if there's something that really needs to happen. But take
Mhm.
that off
Mhm.
your phone as a first step and just see how that feels. And then you have to get out your computer to look at email or check in on things. And that might be enough to help you get going in that direction. So those are just a couple little things that you can do. Again, we're not saying pendulum shift. We're saying small incremental changes. What would you add?
Yeah, so perspective is something I think about, will this matter in a day, week, month, year, 5 years, 10 years? You can keep going down the list, right? Is this something that you're working on that you want people to celebrate at your funeral, right? Like, so zooming out, like, really helps you think, like, how urgent, like, how significant is this work, which are different things, significance and urgency. And you and I have had the luxury of traveling a lot and living around the world. And so, I'll just ask you two questions, right? Like, do other countries outperform US based schools at times, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And do other countries work less than the US?
Yes.
So, I mean, these are, go and do your own research, but we've lived, in different places and traveled, and I'm sure many of the folks watching, listening have as well. And we also have international audiences. So everybody outside of the US right now is laughing. People inside the US are going, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
You mean everybody doesn't work like all these hours? And but people know, the outcomes. So, to me, if so what's different, right? And so t we talked about the one big thing, right? The one big thing also turns into something I teach called the big three. So what's the one thing I could do today, just for summary, that makes everything else easier or unnecessary? And that leads to sort of like the big three, which is your one thing and kind of two other sort of major, let's call them power moves or something, aligned to your biggest goals and vision for the school. That if you only did these three things, right, and you got them done before noon, you would say today's a successful day, right? Again, you don't leave campus, but now you're just getting to all the other stuff. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But even if you didn't get to the other stuff, you would feel like you had a successful day. And then I think the last thing I have to say with this is, you know, be, you said district, right? I'm going to ignore that unless they ask three times and people try it on, see if that works for you or not. Another way to think about it is district says urgent. And so I give them C, D, or F effort if it's going to derail what needs to happen on campus. So that, I don't know why, but when I'm speaking or coaching, when I say this doesn't need your A effort, right? And I think I'm sure you would say this is the same for your leaders you support, but we support some A players, right? They're used to doing things well and doing everything well.
Yeah.
And one of the shifts you learn to get to, like, ruckus maker mode is determining, does this need A effort, or is it okay to just turn in the thing because nobody's going to look and it's not going to change anything on campus. So CD or F effort, and or now that there's so many tech tools around AI and that kind of stuff, use it, right?
Yeah.
And get it done in 5 seconds, turn it in, and keep rocking, right?
Yeah.
Visit teachers, observe, give great feedback, acknowledge students for doing the right thing, elevate the culture, call parents, build community partnerships. And you can do more of that by leveraging your busy work with AI.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole nother topic that we will address later on, which is the CD and F effort, the using AI to improve things. But again, going back to this idea of what's really important, spending the time and energy on the things that are important and not wasting your time and energy on things that are not. And, that's the name of the game. That's what you've got to decide. What's actually worth your time and effort and what is not. And that may be one of the hardest jobs that a principal has.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly hard if you're going it alone, which is another premise that we'll reject. We'll also get to in
Yeah.
a future episode. But if you have support, a lot easier, to make those moves. So, all right. I think that's the podcast for today. How are you feeling about the conversation?
This was good. I like it. I feel better about this than I felt when I started to sit down and write it into the Google Doc. So I think we should go forward.
All right, cool. So, yeah, this episode, obviously, because you're listening on Better Leaders, Better Schools, the next episode where we continue to reject some premises, that'll be over at the transformative principle.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This is awesome, as always, chatting with you, Danny, and I look forward to having many more conversations like this.
Right on. Hey, Ruckus Makers, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something in you so that you want to do school different, or maybe you have a new idea about how to reimagine education on your campus, then check out My Principal Coach. It's your AI-powered leadership mentor. It's trained on 10 years of mastermind and private coaching experience that I've had. It's like having a world-class ruckus maker mentor in your pocket 24/7. You can start your free 7-day trial at myprincipalcoach.com.